Hi, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads.com, and today I want to show you a simple tutorial learning how to do some seed bead bezeling featuring the DiscDuo, which is a 2-hole bead that we're going to bezel around, as well as a 10 by 14 millimeter cab. We'll be learning the bezeling, the correct way to finish it off if you do want to hang it as earrings, or you can also make it as a lovely pendant as well. Gather along your materials and we'll get ready to create the fun Arctic earrings. So to begin our Arctic earrings, I have 4 feet of thread on my needle. And the first thing I want to do is a stop bead. This is a bead that is going to come off the project. It is not included, but it's going to literally stop the beads from falling off the thread as I work with it. I'm using a bead that is not associated with the project and leaving myself just about 2 or 3 inches there at the end, enough to grab on and tie a knot onto. Take your needle and thread through that seed bead 1 and 2 times. From there, now it is time then, once that is on, to add our DiscDuo. The DiscDuo is going to sit at the top and it's going to be framed by the actual Delica bead. So I have the Delica beads there in that Duracoat silver. I'm going to put on one of my DiscDuos and then I'm going to add 4 of my Delicas. Taking the thread and needle then, I'm going to go back through the other hole of the Delica bead, which is going to make those 4 seed beads kind of sit on the outside edge. From here, I'm going to add 4 more Delicas. And so then from the bottom hole back to the top hole that I just came through. That's going to put 4 more on, which is 8. From here, 4 more go on. And if you haven't checked out the bezeled beauty design, this is similar to that in how you are actually kind of framing out a 2-hole bead. 4 more go on, and I'm going to go back through the second hole of the DiscDuo. So I'm literally just kind of spinning around the DiscDuo, adding in these 4 beads at a time. And then 4 more go on. And you can see where it's missing the 4 along the outer edge. That's where I'm going to sew into, is that hole that my thread is coming out of. So I've circled the whole way around the DiscDuo now, and we've added in those 16 beads. You can see they don't sit very nicely. So what we're going to do is we are going to make them sit nicely. We're going to go back through all of them. So coming out your DiscDuo, I'm going to take my thread and needle around the whole entire circle of beads, which is going to link all of those sets of 4 together and create more of a rounded look rather than kind of that choppy Delicas connecting to the DiscDuo look. So going the whole way around here, I'm connecting and sewing through all of them. Pushing that stop bead down off to the side. And when you get back to the start, you'll be able to see kind of where it started and how it gets more of that rounded look. Once I'm through there, I'm just going to pick a random point to come out with my thread and needle of my Delica beads. And I'm going to begin my peyote stitch. So when you look at the example here, it's just those 2 rows of Delicas, and then we're actually going to go along the top here with 2 rows of our 15 OC beads. We'll do that first, building up the middle, and then we'll build up along the back. Building up the middle, I have that stop bead pushed to the back, and we're going to do peyote stitch. So I'm going to pick up a 15 OC bead. We're going to skip the next 11 in line, and I'm going to sew through the next Delica bead. Going the whole way along the project then, I'm going to add in 8 of these 15s as the first row, adding a 15, skipping a bead, and sewing through the next of the Delica beads. Again, adding a 15, skipping the next Delica bead, and sewing through the next 11. So you're always skipping a bead and sewing through. Now you can see those 15 O's are going to want to sit on the outside. We're going to push them towards the middle so that way they frame the middle actually of the actual DiscDuo. And as you continue around, you're going to end up with 8. And then what I'm going to show you is how to step up and actually add in more and a whole nother row of that peyote stitch. This entire project is based on peyote stitch, so if you don't know peyote, you may want to stop with the Arctic earrings, watch a peyote video, and then come back and join us to make these earrings at a later date. So I'm going around here, and you can see I have on 6 of my 15s. I'm going to add my last 2. And we are doing even count peyote the whole way around this project. And then as I finish now adding in that first one, so I have the first one here that I'm adding in back into. I have it on my needle. I'm going to go through the first delica bead that my thread was initially coming out of, and then I'm stepping up through the first of the 15 seed bead that I added on this last row. Again, we started out with 16 total delicas, and then we added 8 of our 15s. Now I'm going to go around that DiscDuo one more time, kind of pulling them in nice and tight along the center there, adding them in with another row of 8 more of my 15s. As I do this row of peyote, I'm only catching on to the 15s as I add another row. So I'm going to be adding a 15, sewing into the next 15 in line. Same thing here, add a row, sew into the next one. So this will add, like I said, an additional 8 15s, and this will really kind of frame in that DiscDuo, which will adversely pop out kind of the back row of the delica beads. And because I do have that 4 feet of thread on, it's a little bit to pull all the threads through to get them on here for you. But I am back at the start now, and the one thing that I definitely want to do is, ready? It's kind of like magic. You're going to do a nice little tight pull. And see how when I did that tight pull, all of those delica beads kind of formed in, and then the 15-0s fit in nicely as well. I have one more 15-0 that I want you to add, and then we're going to sew through that first 15-0 that our thread was coming out of. Give a nice tight pull, and that completely frames in your DiscDuo bead. From here, we're going to go from the top of that DiscDuo bead, and we're going to start adding around the bottom. I want you to get your thread and needle positioned on the bottom row, or the very first row of those delicas of peyote. And to do so, we're going to take our thread and needle, we're coming out the 15, we're simply going to turn the thread and needle around the opposite way and go through the delica bead that sits right beside that 15-0. That's going to put us in position now to add our next row onto our peyote stitch. For our next row of our peyote stitch, we want it to start to expand outward. To do so, we're going to start with a bead that's a little bit bigger than the delica. So we're going to an 11 seed bead, and again I'm still going with that Duracoat galvanized silver from the delica to the 11, both that same color. And these beads are bigger. So as I go around that peyote stitch, and I'm stitching through the delicas again that created that first row. So it's every other delica basically that you can kind of see put it in positioned there. And then I'm going through and adding the 11-0s in. And again, because the 11-0 seed bead is bigger than the delica bead, it's naturally going to sit outward. And we want that to happen. When you look at the back of the earring here, it almost sits domed. That you can see that kind of doming effect that you want to achieve. And we're getting that by doing this delica stitching. So I'm continuing around. And again, we're adding in 8 beads this go round. We started off with our original number of 16, which was actually 2 rows of peyote stitch. If you know peyote, you add 2 rows at the very start. Now my stop bead is a little bit in the way there. I'm going to take my finger and move that stop bead just a little bit further out on the thread line so it's out of the way. Adding my next 11 then, and continue on my way here. And I have one more to add before I do my step up. I'll add my last of my 11-0 seed bead, go through the delica that the thread was initially coming out of, and just like we did when we added our second row of 15s, you're also sewing through the first bead that you added in that row. So in this case, it's easy to know it's that first 11-0 seed bead. Now you can see it sits again as kind of that almost like a sun ray, that those 11 O's are sitting out a little bit from the delica beads. We're going to enhance that even more. And this time around, we're going to switch from, originally we had that 15 at the front, then we went to 11, or delica, then we go in 11. Now we're going to go to our 8 O seed bead. So just like we did, you're going 8 O, and then you're grabbing on to the 11 O's that you just added. So an 8 O goes on, and I sew through the next 11 O's. So you're using 8 of these 11s. I'm sorry, 8 of the 8s. And I'm using the Aztec gold. I like that soft gold color. So I'm using that to highlight just like I did the 15s, where I used that Duracoat galvanized gold, the yellow gold color. And I'm going all the way around, adding in those 8 O seed beads. And you can see sometimes that tail, you just need to push out of the way and make sure that does not get trapped inside of your project. Just like I did with the previous row, I want you to sew through the 11 that's there, the last one, and also step up through that first 8 that you did. Now you may see a little bit of extra thread showing. Go ahead and, just like we've done with the other rows, give a nice little tight pull to tighten up that thread and enhance that doming effect. Once you have that pulled nice and tight and you have those 8 O's in place, it's time for our last row around, which the last row around is going to add 2 15s between each of the delicas. So just like we've been doing, going around in a circle, pick up 2 delicas, sew into the next 8. 2 delicas, and I like the delicas here on the outer edge. You could use 3 of the 15s if you want, but I like the delicas because they give kind of a sharp look, and I want that. 2 delicas into the next 8. I'm going to go the whole way around, adding in the 2 delicas between each of the 8s, and then I'm going to literally sew that same row around again, reinforcing that outer row of this top cabochon look, which we're achieving with the DiscDuo. After you spin around and reinforce that delica, it's time to add in the wire guard. Now, if you don't want the look of the wire guard, here on the one that I'm going to do as a little pendant, I actually used an 11 O seed bead on each side and then the 8 O seed bead to sit above. So where I'm adding the wire guard, I actually added the seed beads because I'm going to put this onto a jump ring then and hang this as a pendant. So you can do it as earrings or a pendant. And you can see the fun change in the mood cabs. I love the mood cabs and kind of the color change that they have going on. But right now what we're going to do is basically finish off the top of this Arctic earring. When you finish off the top, this also could be an earring unto itself. This is a really sweet idea too if you would like to use beads that are associated with a mother's bracelet or a mother's necklace. You could hang those down as little charms as well. So coming out of the delica beads before an 8 O, pick up a 15 O, your wire guard. So back down the other side of the wire guard, add a 15 O, making sure that your wire guard has, or the thread is actually hidden in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew through our next set of our delicas. So jumping over that 8 O seed bead here, we're going to sew through the next set of delicas and pull that in. Now you can see that wire guard is kind of pinched open here on the one that is finished. What I did is just took my fingers, you can take a plier if you want to, but pinch it together a little bit, and that gets more of that closed look. To reinforce, I'm going to go back through the 11 O that sits after the delicas, out through the 8 O seed bead, and you can see when I pull this, the thread will just kind of disappear in there. You won't actually see it. I'm going to go then back up through that 15 and through the wire guard, because this is where the weight is going to be, holding on the ear wire. Back down the wire guard on the other side, back through then those 2 delica beads that sit after, making sure that your thread, when you're taking it through, sits inside that wire channel. And now I want to get to the base or the bottom of the project. So I still have my stop bead on. I'm completely done the top. If you would want to, these are such a cute little way to make links. You could actually link these on and make the earring a little bit bigger if you wanted to. You could actually take this and make a bracelet linking on to the whole project as well. So tons of uses for this little bezeled look of the DiscDuo bead. From here though, what I'm going to do is actually connect down to the bottom, and you can see how it sits, that the actual DiscDuo sits in front of the cab. So what we're going to concentrate now is, now that the top is finished, I'm going to bring my thread and needle down to the bottom so that it is exiting after the 11 delica, right after the 8 OC bead. So I'm going to go to the very bottom, drawing a line, and I'm going to exit between these 2 delica beads, getting ready then to make a loop that my cab is going to sit inside of. Exiting between the 2 11-0 delicas, we're going to add 29 delicas onto our thread. So I want you to count and make sure that your count is 29. So we have 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to get 29 on my needle. I'm not going to make you sit and watch me pick up 29, but you want to make sure that your count is 29. It's essential to get the cabochon to fit correctly for this 10 by 14 millimeter cab. So after you have your 29 beads on, we're actually going to bring it around and create a loop. You may be saying, you promised even count peyote, why 29? The reason that we are doing 29 is because we're actually going to be linking on to the 3 bottom beads of the top piece. So we're linking on to the delica, the 8-0, and then the delica that our thread was coming out of. So that's going to make 30, 31, 32. So we're still doing that even count peyote. That loop then is going to fit our cab. So our resin cab, this mood cab, I actually like this earring, is pretty reversible, even though it looks a little bit more black on that side. I love though the funness of the mood cab. But there's a fair amount of other 10 by 14s if you want to take a look at those options online with us. This needs to be big enough to fit your cab. If you want to do something bigger, go ahead and check out Lindsay's counts in her blog for some of the different rivolis. You could put a rounded there and really change up the design of what you put at the bottom. But again, my count is 29, and then we're sewing through those 3 beads. From here, we're going to begin a row of peyote stitch, and I'm going to begin right away with that row. So I have my 11s on, and I'm coming out those 3 beads. I'm going to sew through my first bead and begin after that. So there you have your first row there. From here, we're actually going to grab on to our 15 O's right away. Most of the other rows that we add then will be along the back. So you're going to skip basically kind of those first 2 11s after the 8, and then you're going to add a 15, skip a bead, sew through a bead. So just like we did along the top with the DiscDuo, you're adding 1 15 in place of all of the 11s. See how the 15 wants to sit towards the middle of the project? You want that to occur, and you want to establish kind of what is your top row and your bottom row and not have that switch or flip. So the 15 is literally just going to kind of sit right in there. As I work my way around, I'll go ahead and add the 15s in along this front row and make sure they stay kind of in and towards the top. As you add your last 15 in this row, you're going to sew through the first 2 11s as well as the first 11 after the 8 OC bead, and bring your needle out. That's going to put your first row of 15s, and see how those want to pop to the outside. Make sure to just kind of force them inward. If you need to, a lot of times what I'll do is kind of stick my finger in the middle and then give a little bit of a pull. From here then we're going to step up, and to do our step up we're actually going to add an 11 OC bead right away. We're gonna, I'm sorry, a 15 OC bead right away. We're gonna add a 15 O after coming out the 11 right after the 8 O. And then we're gonna circle around and add in this row of our 15s. So I'm gonna go around, add my second row of 15s in, and then as I come around to the front here, I'm gonna add in a couple a couple of 15s on each side, and then we'll start that scalloped look. If you don't want the scalloped look, you don't have to do the scalloped look, and you can stop after your 2 rows. But I like the scallop look on this guy. So we're going in, adding a second row of our delica beads onto the peyote, or I'm sorry, second row of our 15-0s onto the delica stitch of the peyote. As you come back to the top, I'm going to add, coming out of my last 15-0, I'm adding 1 more 15 and then sewing back through those 3 beads along the top. And that's going to put that final little 15 right along the top there. From here then, we are going to, again, if you want to, you can create that scallop. I'm going to show you how to create that scalloped effect along the center, but if you want to, you can actually stop with the rounded effect too. That's up to you. But to get the scallop effect, and then also to put the 4 little beads along the top here to create that nice kind of little line, we are going to come out through our first of our 15 at the top, and just like we would be adding peyote, we're basically adding a bead at every other position. So where you have it here along the side here, you can see you have your 2 rows of peyote, and every other one we're going to add our 15 at the top, take down through, and then add a 15 at the top. So coming out here right along the top, you're going to add a 15, go through your next 15-0 just like if you were doing peyote stitch, and then instead of adding another bead, we're going to go down the peyote row and then up the peyote row. So we're basically skipping that area where you would add a 15. It hides the thread and it kind of pulls it inside. Then we're up to the next section, add another 15, sew through just like you would be adding peyote, and then instead of adding your next 15 in the row, you're going down a row to hide the thread, and then up a row. Once you're up that row then, ready for the next 15, sew through just like we would be continuing the peyote stitch, and then for the next one you're going down a row and up a row. Give a nice little yank after each one to pull those scallops in towards the center of the project. I'm going to scallop the rest of this oval, and then as we get back to the start, I'll show you how we link those 4 beads right along the top. When you get back to the top and you have your last little scallop in there, what you're actually going to do is come back up through the final 15, add on 4 15s, and then go over to that first 15 on the opposite side. What that does is close in the top and make it a little bit more finished at the top, so that way you are not having the possibility that your cab is going to be lost. So at this point the front is actually completed. When you look at the front then, kind of look at it there, you have that nice kind of open look with a nice scalloped look in effect as well. What we're going to do now is switch from the front to the back of the project. So give a nice little tight yank. If you want to, you can go back around the center. That's up to you. A lot of times when I have a cabochon, if it's a open cab that I have the 15-0 showing here, then I would go back through and reinforce. Because I have that scallop, that's pretty closed and you're not going to have the issue where it's going to fall out the front. From here, I'm going to actually go from the front of the project to the back of the project, literally just sewing again right along that peyote line through the 11-0 that sits along the back and out the back. When I come out the back then, I'm going to do another row of my delica beads. So I'm going to do another row of peyote with the delica beads. To get to that position, I'm going to take my thread and needle through that delica 8 delica that sits right along the top, and as I come over to the other side, I am then kind of right in position to start that stitch. So on goes a delica bead, and you're going to go into that outer row of the delicas, creating another row of delicas. When you are finished with it, then you'll have a 2-1 kind of progression. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So you can see right now that adds our first of our second row and that grouping of 2 11s. When you're working with it, try to make sure that those beads are kind of staying popped up. And when you sew into the delica bead from the row before, what I want you to kind of concentrate on doing is concentrate on sewing through the outer wall of the delica. That way you're not getting mixed into any of the threads that are already through the delica. That's going to make your peyote stitch sit the nicest. So when you're sewing through, you're going to sew with your needle towards the outer wall so you're not getting tangled in any of the thread that is already through the delica from previous rows of peyote. So go ahead and add in your delica beads along the outer edge, and then we'll catch up together. When you finish putting in your last of your delicas, you're then going to sew through the next 2 delica beads. Sew through that 8-0, and it might be getting a little stiff there in the middle. Sew through the delica beads after the 8-0 to get, basically we're jumping from one side to the other, and then you're going to sew up through the seed beads that sit along the edge. And as I sew through the seed beads that sit along the edge, now I'm going to start back to my 15-0s. So the 15-0s then are going to kind of seam that up, and we're going to bring in the 15 rows, or the 15-0s, excuse me, for 3 rows along the back. You can do the whole first row and not worry about putting in the cab. As we get to the second and third rows, we'll start adding in the cab in place, but I'm continuing with my peyote stitch, adding in my 15-0s right along that back, all the way along the outer edge. So just like we've been doing. And as you do this, you'll start to notice that back then coming around and kind of cinching in the back as well to get that nice peyote bezel. Coming back around then with those 15-0s, when you get to the very end, I want you to go through the last delica bead and add 2 of your 15s. Those 2 15s are going to kind of jump along the 3 delicas. From there, going through the 8-0 seed bead, I'm going to add 2 more delicas and then step up again across those 3 delicas into that 4th delica that sits right next to our natural step up, which is going to be through the 15-0. What that does is, move that stop bead out of the way, that pulls that nice and together right along the top and starts to pull in more to get that nice oval shape. So you can see right there at the top. At this point now, it is time to kind of put your cab in and make sure to position it just kind of right centered, right in that little basket. And I'm going to hold that cab in place as I go along and add my next 2 rows of my 15-0s. So along the back here, you're going to seam up 2 more rows of the 15-0s. When we get along the top, I'll show you kind of what we're doing to seam up along the top. So I'm going to let mine sit out until I get to that top, and I'm just going to go in, go the whole way around, adding a 15-0 along that row. And then just like we did magic wise kind of for the front of the DiscDuo as well as the front, when you are finished, before you pull tight and get that nice kind of seamed up effect, you want to make sure that your cab is in place. And again, this is a 10 by 14 millimeter cab. If you do want to use a Rivoli or something different in shape or different in size, keep in mind that's totally doable. Your center count, that original count of the delica beads that I put on, that was 29, will change. So I'm going through here, adding in all of those 15s. And I have not pulled tightly yet because I have the cabochon kind of sitting down and it's not in position yet. And as I work my way around here adding my 15s, and I get to that last space, what I'm going to do is actually go through both of the 15-0s that are already there. Add one 15-0, sew through the 2 that are already there. Add one more 15 in, and then get ready to do your step up through the last 2 rows of 15s. So here's how it looks right now. You can see there's extra thread showing. I'm going to put my cab in and then give a pull and get those seed beads kind of bent in. And from here now, I'm going to do my 3rd row of my 15s to really trap that oval in place. And I'm going to position my oval, opening that back up just a little bit, making sure that my oval is sitting nice and on the oval. Flipping it over to the front then, you can see that nice scalloping effect. See how it's sitting a little bit off? I'm just going to take my fingers and move that cab into place before I finish seaming up the back. Once it's on then, and on that nice oval, give that tight pull again. One more trip around, adding in your 15-0s. As you come to that center point then, where we have the delicate bead, or the 15-0s rather, that we just added 1 in, you're going to skip over 2 and add 1 in the place. So you can see there's 2 below. We're catching on to that middle one that we just added and adding only 1 15 in each place. At the very bottom, the very kind of peak of the bottom, the other thing that I did is actually skipped putting in a 15-0, so that way that brings it more into that oval shape, because naturally it's going to want to sit a little bit rounded. And skipping that 15-0 right here, so just like we did the scalloped, that very bottom 15-0, I just went down and then back up and continued on. Also, if you want to, you could do a scalloped effect along this back here if you wanted the front and the back to mimic one another. That's another alternative. There's a lot of alternatives to kind of ending your seed beaded bezels when you're working with things as well, and that you can actually take on as kind of your own little personalized touch and finish off exactly the way that you want it to be. But continuing on again, just adding in those 15-0s right along the back then of that delicate stitch. The last thing to do then as you finish your earring here is to go back along the project here, tie off the thread. And what I did with the original sample was feed my thread the whole way back along my peyote line here, along the back, getting back to my starter thread along that center of the DiscDuo. And then I'm literally just going to tie 2 knots to tie them together. So I'm going to take that thread and needle, feed it the whole way along the outer edge here then, back up till I get to the starter thread, tie the 2 threads off together, and then just burn down the thread along the corner. When you burn down the thread and you have that nice little tie, you're just going to go in with your thread burner, your threads up. Again, this is on the back side. I'm going to burn down those threads. And then I'm going to burn them with this thermal thread, nice and flush against the project. You don't even see them then exposed along the back of the project. They're kind of hidden right along there. And if you want to, you can put them on ear wires. I have some lever backs, and I'll just show you how I'm going to add those to the lever backs. Anytime you have an open loop, you want to make sure to grab some pliers and open the loop by pushing to the side. Look and see where the opening actually is before you open it, in case you need to change it to the other side. You're going to slide on your wire guard. If you are doing the 8/0 seed bead, you'll use a jump ring or a piece of wire and attach to a bail or a pendant. I'm going to slide that right in onto the ear wire, and then I'm just going to take my pliers and close that up. At that point then, your earrings are finished and completed, and you have this nice Arctic bezeled look. Again, you can do it as the scalloped, you can do it as the opening, you have more of kind of that oval. And I like the look of the resin cabs because of kind of the fun color change that they are. That's also why I went with gold on this one and why I went with black, because you're never really sure. You can see the difference in temperature there from near one light to another, the different colors and ranges of the mood cab that you'll want. For the pendant itself, I did use 11 of my 10 of the 11 O's, because I used 2 at the top. You're using 8 of your 8 O's and then 1 at the top, so 9 of those. If you're doing the pair of earrings, then you're going to need 16 total of your 8 O's, 2 wire guards. You're going to use 16 total of your 11 O's, and then a collection of your delicas as well as your 15 O seed beads. Again, if you want that wire guard along the top, you'll need 2 wire guards and link into that. I did keep it very neutral for mine and went with the Duracoat galvanized in the Miyuki, both in the delica and in the 11 O seed bead, as well as the galvanized yellow gold in the 15O, also the Miyuki brand, and then the Aztec gold in the 11O seed bead. For the purple one here, I did the silver line matte amethyst, light amethyst in the delica bead. If you need any of these materials, you can go back to the video, kind of jot down the list of materials, or below the video, there is a link below the description of the video to all the different products for you to purchase from us at PotomacBeads.com and PotomacBeads.eu. We would love to be able to send you the supplies and really inspire you to try this fun little simple bezel, which will get you into bezeling and hopefully not frustrate you like a lot of bezels will do. As always, you can give me a little thumbs up if you like this video, write in some comments, ask questions, give suggestions for more video, and kind of build that community that we strive to have. Also, again, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, stay connected with us via our website, as well as sign up to get our emails, and also join our Facebook group and check out Facebook. Our Facebook group is for beading and jewelry making, and there is a wonderful collection of artistic individuals that make wonderful products and can give you some inspiration and design ideas as well. As always, thank you for watching and have fun making the Arctic pendant and earrings.